Brothers and sisters, I'm sure that, like me, you have all met at least one person in your life who claims to be sent by God, to proclaim his word, to do his bidding, to prophesy some sort of calamity, or to correct all and sundry around them. Throughout all of salvation history, there have been those who've truly been called by God to do exactly these things, and there have been those who've either called themselves or have been deceived by Satan to do such things, supposedly on behalf of God. In Old Testament times, there were prophets who were called by God and false prophets who weren't. In the New Testament, we can see St. Paul and St. John in their letters warning us constantly about false teachers of the word. The million-dollar question for us then is, when approached by someone coming in the name of God, how do we discern whether they are actually sent by God or not? Well, brothers and sisters, perhaps we can look at those who have truly been called by God to ascertain what conditions prove that a calling is truly divine. We can use these conditions to test the authenticity of so-called modern-day prophets and teachers. Let's start by looking at today's readings, where we meet three men who were truly called by God: Isaiah, Paul, and Peter. In the Gospel, if we break it down, we can see four clear stages in Peter's authentic divine calling. Simon Peter and his professional fishermen friends had been fishing all night and caught nothing. Jesus, who is clearly a learned and holy man, but perhaps knows little about fishing, tells Simon to put out into deep water and pay out your nets for a catch. This is the first stage of his calling, brothers and sisters. God asks those he calls to do something that seems implausible, incredible, foolish even. To St. Francis, God said, "Rebuild my church." To Moses, God said, "Go liberate my people." In the case of St. Paul, God blinded him with scales and then required him to submit to an unknown Christian to be healed of the blindness. "You will be told what to do," Jesus said. Those sent by God will be asked to do something that may very well be contrary to human reckoning. The second part of the first stage is the person's response. Simple. They listen and carry out the instructions in the best way they can. In the Gospel, Simon Peter and his fellow fishermen trusted that Jesus was a holy man of authority, and so they put out their nets, even though common sense would have said it was a waste of time. St. Francis started rebuilding the church of San Damiano, even though this wasn't what God was talking about, and Moses headed back to Egypt. The second stage, brothers and sisters, in response to the person's simple obedience, is God's manifestation of his power, divinity, abundance. We see this not only in the Gospel, but also in the first reading, when Isaiah witnessed the greatness of God. Those who are about to be called to do extraordinary works will be given extraordinary graces and signs. But it is at this point that I want to remind you that Satan, the father of lies, often comes as an angel of light so as to deceive humanity. How many people over the ages have been led by Satan to appear to do the works of God? St. Paul refers to these so-called prophets and teachers in 2 Corinthians when he writes, "For such men are false apostles, deceitful workers, masquerading as apostles of Christ. And no wonder, for Satan himself masquerades as an angel of light." It is not surprising then if his servants masquerade as servants of righteousness. Their end will correspond to their actions. At this point, I want to stress the importance of the third stage, which provides critical evidence that the calling is from God and not a deception of Satan. The third stage is a humble response from the recipient of the call in the face of God's omnipotence. Simon responded to the massive haul of fish by saying, "Leave me, Lord, I'm a sinful man." Isaiah responded to God's manifestation saying, "What a wretched state I'm in. I'm lost, for I'm a man of unclean lips." The New American Bible says of Isaiah, "The enormous abyss between God's sovereign holiness and man's sin overwhelmed the prophet." Moses said, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the sons of Israel out of Egypt?" If a person comes to you claiming to be from God but has no humility and is instead puffed up by their calling, then you can be sure they're not sent by God. Finally, brothers and sisters, in the final stage, we see the eternal omnipotent God condescending and entrusting incapable men and women to do his bidding, his work, the proclamation of his word. To Simon Peter, Jesus said, "Do not be afraid, from now on it is men you will catch." St. Francis went on to reform religious life, thus rebuilding the church in ways he never imagined. Isaiah was sent out to proclaim to both commoners and kings alike both destruction and salvation. St. Paul becomes the apostle to the Gentiles travelling to the ends of the known world. So, brothers and sisters, the next time someone tries to convince you that they're a messenger sent from God, test their call using these 4 stages as a guide. Did God ask them to do something that seemed foolish? And did they then respond in docility? Did God then manifest his omnipotence to them? Then, most importantly, did they respond to God's omnipotence with overwhelming humility and submission? And finally, were they then entrusted to do something beyond their own strength and capacities, continually recognizing their ineptness for the task at hand? If you get yes to all these questions, then you can probably safely listen to what they have to say and take it as a message sent by God.